And then 2015, I went from being Officer of the Year to complete burnout, depression, suicidal ideation, PTSD. And then what I later learned was adrenal fatigue. Became a criminal court victim advocate. There for about 5 years. I went back and got my master's in criminology and victimology, which is where I started to learn and understand more about trauma, and that it's not exclusive to victims and it's not a dirty word. At the same time, I was going through a 10-month yoga teacher training and learning about the physiology of stress and trauma, every rabbit hole I could find. And it was in an effort, selfishly, to heal myself or understand myself. Feeling like you're not making an impact anymore is one of the three main pillars of burnout. The other two are the exhaustion and cynicism. You start to feel like you're just not moving the needle anymore. What's the point? That's when you start to lose your purpose and lose your drive. That's the whole reason that we're there, is to make an impact, to make a difference. When you lose that, you're out of gas. So then that further feeds into the exhaustion, into the cynicism. You've just got a recipe for disaster.
AK. I obviously love the initials. Hits home with a whole lot of the law enforcement, the veteran community.
And AK is real. My name is Amanda K. Those really are my initials. It's not just some gimmick, just to clarify.
Gotcha. I know that you're working on big things, and I know that was something you put out on Doug's podcast. Tell this story. If you would just kind of give us a little bit of an overview of how long you were in law enforcement and what time frame did you decide that you were going to move over to this powerful work that can save a lot of law enforcement lives.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And thank you for the opportunity to be here and chat with you today. So I actually started my law enforcement career when I was 19, doing undercover online investigations, went to the academy when I was 20. And then once I graduated with my undergrad, started as an actual paid law enforcement officer.
Right.
Did that for a few years. The bulk of my career was on afternoon shift road patrol. And then 2015, I went from being Officer of the Year to complete burnout, depression, suicidal ideation, PTSD. And then what I later learned was adrenal fatigue. Became a criminal court victim advocate after that. And I was there for about 5 years. And during that time, I went back and got my master's in criminology and victimology, which is where I started to learn and understand more about trauma, and that it's not exclusive to victims and it's not a dirty word. And at the same time, I was going through a 10-month yoga teacher training and learning about the physiology of stress and trauma. And so I had all these bells and whistles going off in my brain and connecting all these dots. And so I went down a lot of rabbit holes, meditation and neurobiology and even Reiki and like all these, every rabbit hole I could find. And it was in an effort to heal myself or understand myself. So I had all of this rattling around. And then in 2020, I left that advocacy position, took a little bit of time off because we were in the middle of a pandemic and I had a toddler and I had the opportunity to do so. Within 6 months or so, I thought, what am I going to do with all of this information? After some prayer and deep thought, it hit me, we have a major crisis in the first responder world. Take it back to them. And so I formed an app. I started forming curriculums for trainings, and it has evolved into coaching individuals and doing trainings all over the country, speaking and doing keynotes. I authored Beat the Burnout, and I just turned in final edits for my second book last week.
What's the name of that one?
Responder Reset, 99 Real-Time Tactics for Frontline Regulation.
That's amazing. Several things that you said there. Victim advocacy. Tell us more about that. What does that entail?
Yeah. So I was a criminal court victim advocate. I worked with the prosecutor's office, and we worked in the courthouse, and our job was to assist and support victims all the way through the arraignment process, up through any kind of conviction and sentencing, even, post-release control stuff, sometimes even pre-charges. So there were times if there was a violent act, and somebody was in the hospital, as the officers doing their charges, we would immediately go assist and let them know what their rights are as a victim, what resources were available, how they can find the support that they need. And then there were times as well where, if somebody's been in prison for several years and we get a notification, hey, they're getting out, we notify the victim and let them know, hey, there's a date set, and kind of just follow them throughout that journey and support them and educate them as well. During that time is when I went back to get my master's degree, and it fell under criminology, but it was a focus in victimology. And it
Okay.
ironically then opened my eyes to this whole world of trauma.
So what was the catalyst that brought you to doing that work?
I needed a job.
Okay. Okay. So this
So
was
so I left full-time law enforcement without a plan. I took about a month off, and very unintentionally, my system collapsed. I slept for about 18 hours a day, every day for a month. I was used to going 100 miles an hour. My savings wasn't going to last me forever, and I needed to get up and make some moves. And somebody said, hey, you would be great for this position. They're looking for somebody. And it was within the same county. So I already knew so many of the people, and went in to interview, and they hired me on the spot.
that's powerful because, again, with your background, you're not just somebody off the street. You actually wore the badge, did the work. Most people have never heard of that job, of that position, of those things. So for law enforcement officers that are in that position to where they know that they're burning out and they're at the end of their wick and they don't know what it looks like, but they know that the paycheck keeps their life moving as long as they keep showing up to work. And one of the quotes I wrote down from you and Doug's podcast, which was, law enforcement officers don't fake sick to stay home. They fake being okay to go to work. And that was from the book, Living Blue, which I also put that on my list on Amazon as well. That I think is something that I can definitely attest to and I can speak to. I can remember 2 days in a 3.5-year period that I had to call out sick. And that was violent vomiting, completely unable to stand on my feet. And it always coincided with my days off. So it was like I would get sick the day before my days off. I was sick that day. Then luckily, both my days off, I was able to just stay in bed and then be back to work. But I recognize that idea, right? That we as, especially law enforcement, right? I'm not a firefighter, so I can't speak to that. But I know that there's this feeling that if you're not on your shift, if you're not, because you're empowered. Here's how it worked for me. I worked in a city in Oklahoma City. I think that was like 60 to 70,000, but the number of people that are actually there are much larger than that. And our city is literally merged on both sides with Oklahoma City, and then Oklahoma University is in Norman, Oklahoma. It's merged with that one. So there's no break. It's straight city, city, city the whole way through. And we have a ton of crime coming from both directions into our city. And then they try to run the opposite directions. And so we were taking calls all the time where you're running on so little sleep, especially if you're coming from combat veterans to now get into law enforcement, but being my perspective, but you feel like you're going to let people down. And that's your part of the city. I know that when I go to work, I already know where I'm going to fall in the shift as far as seniority. And I always picked the most dangerous, violent, where our Section 8 housing was, where all the action is, and where I can help the most people. And I think one of the things that I've heard from you and that I can attest to is I felt like the citizens, like the people there, even though you, as a law enforcement officer, you start to not like people, and we'll get to that later.
This is true.
Even though I don't necessarily like the person I'm coming into contact with, I had in my soul that I wanted to be the person, because I work out 6 days a week. I always have. I've got all this experience, combat experience. I need to be the one there because I could make the difference between life and death and saving somebody, where somebody else who may be stuck in my district, because that's how everybody else looked at our district as being the one you get stuck with. Whereas the guys like me and a couple other guys always wanted those districts because we, wanted to be there to make a difference. And one of the things that you talk about is whenever you start feeling like you don't make a difference, that's one of the clues that you're in burnout. So probably I'd say about 6 months into my law enforcement career, I've already figured out that I'm not making a difference. And the next 3 years is just burnout as slowly as I can possibly manage it. But the things you're talking about, that's exactly what I was experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. So a fancy way of saying it is a low sense of self-efficacy. That's what the research talks about. But I'm also a big nerd, and I've done an incredible amount of research in order to better serve and write my book and just better understand what I went through and what others are experiencing. But that feeling like you're not making an impact anymore is one of the three main pillars of burnout. The other two are the exhaustion and cynicism. But when you get to the point where you start to feel like you're just not moving the needle anymore, what's the point? That's when you start to lose your purpose. That's the whole reason that we're there, right? Is to
Mhm.
make an impact, to make a difference, to do good for the world. When you lose that, you're out of gas. You've lost your fuel. And so then that further feeds into the exhaustion, into the cynicism, and then you've
Just
just got a
accelerates it.
recipe for disaster. Yeah.
Like you were talking about burnout, like hitting the gas and holding the brake down at the same time, right? And something that I said to you on our first conversation, which was, I come from Oklahoma, where my whole family works till they die, and that's what you're expected to do. Like, there's no retirement. It's not going to happen for you. That's not how it works in this family in Oklahoma. The only burnouts I knew of were in the high school parking lot. And it was usually at the very end of the day or the last day of school. Everybody's burning out. But that's it, right? Like, we don't understand what burnout is. Literally, when I grew up in the 80s, Gen X, like, that's how we were raised. There's no such thing as burnout. Like, you don't have time for that. Nobody else
Yes.
has the ability to drag you, because that's what your perception of the world is. If you're not working, you're being carried by somebody else, and you don't want to be somebody else's burden, do you, son? And
Right.
so that's how I was raised. So that's
Yep.
where I'm coming into the conversation, having not read your book and only experiencing burnout pretty much my entire career. And I've just kept going. And right now I have 3 jobs and 2 podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to be there for my wife, and we're doing IVF and trying to have kids. And I think that's where some people from our generation, especially, they just look at burnout by default and by the way we were raised as weakness, as an
Mm-hmm.
excuse to just take the day off. And I think that's where the law enforcement don't fake sick to stay home. They fake
Mm-hmm.
being okay to go to work. When I experienced that, I was like, okay, so everybody's doing this. This isn't just me, because there was nobody that was just calling out all the time to stay home. I experienced that later in federal law enforcement nonstop. Those dudes are calling out of work anytime they possibly can. And they're counting the hours of the amount of sick time that they have so they can call out from work, because again, they don't believe in the mission like we did. But that was working inside a prison. So you can kind of
Yeah.
understand that a little bit more. If you would just kind of fill us in on for the Gen Xers, why it isn't just somebody being weak and calling
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's this common misconception that burnout is a personal problem. If it's just too much for you, that's a you problem. You're not strong enough. You don't have enough grit. You don't have enough backbone. And I too, I was raised in the hills of Appalachia in southeastern Ohio, and very similar mindset. You just drive on. And I think there's this element of shame when you do start to feel these things. So nobody talks about it, but there's a lot of people experiencing the same things. People will say, I'm just exhausted. It's like this mental, physical, emotional, but burnout is not just the exhaustion. Are you also very cynical and skeptical and non-trusting? And then do you still feel like you make a difference or not? So, weigh all sides of it before you decide whether or not it's burnout. But like I said, it's a misconception that it's a personal problem, because when we're actually talking about true burnout, it is equally the responsibility of the employer and the individual to make sure and support that person and make sure that they're not burning out. So it is not just a lack of strength or fortitude. Employers, there are six factors in workplace and organizational burnout, and that is fairness, values, control, reward, community, and workload. And all of those things play a part in whether or not you're setting your people up for burnout. And there are times where, you look at certain departments and they have no employee retention. They're just turning over like a revolving door. And then at that point you have to question, like, are they just hiring a bunch of weak people, or are they setting their people up for demise? Being able to pull yourself out of that situation and look at it very clearly. And that was all eye-opening to me. I very much looked at myself going through this as, you must not be as tough as you thought you were. There were times where I had to call off a lot because of physical illness. The physical illness was due to the burnout. My immune system was screaming at me because I was working too much overtime and working out twice a day and marinating in cortisol and stress hormone and living alone without support. And I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And so I had to have my tonsils taken out at 26 years old. I had shingles twice before the time I was 30. Immune system was screaming at me, and I could not for the life of me understand what was happening. In hindsight, there were a lot of missteps. I was in my 20s. I didn't sleep very much. I drank a lot of coffee. There was a period of time where I was just chiefing cigarettes like it was my job. Like there were time, and then, going out to the bars and trying to feel human a little bit. And so there were definitely things that I did that contributed to not being able to be solid. But when I really started recognizing that I was not showing up for my coworkers and for my community and the citizens that I swore to serve, I was not showing up for them in a way that I felt good about it. That's when I pulled myself back and I was like, I'm not doing what I swore to do. I'm not 100%. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm not serving in a capacity that I feel good about anymore.
So when you actually had the aha moment, if you had one, of this is burnout, it is a real thing, it's not just in my head, what was that moment like for you?
I don't know if it was there was one single moment that kind of allowed me to make the decision. I didn't recognize that it was burnout until years later, but I was waking up every day wishing that I hadn't. I turned the seatbelt dinger off on my car and I was running hot to calls with no seatbelt. I was just playing roulette. I was daydreaming about going left to center in front of a semi. I wasn't able to get even the simplest of reports turned in, alarm drops and car lockouts and things that should be really easy. My brain just couldn't focus enough to get the things done that I needed to get done. Full self-disclosure, and I've judged myself enough for all the listeners at this point, just so we know.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear. I showed up to work one time without my duty belt because I was becoming very forgetful.
The number of times I've seen a police officer show up to work without their pistol.
Yeah,
Yeah,
been there
and
too.
they've got their holster, like they've got their belt on, but their cuffs are missing, their pistol's missing, and then there we go. Of course, every time that happens is the time the very first call comes out, and it's officer needs assistance. I'm in a fight with 3 guys by myself up here in the Section 8 housing, and everybody's screaming to that call. And this guy's trying to run back to his house real quick to grab his pistol before he goes. And you're just like,
Yeah.
man, that's a clue. These are the little clues. These are the breadcrumbs that, like you're talking about, law enforcement departments, and not just law enforcement, right? Firefighters, anybody who's working multiple hours for long periods of time and is under the stress, right, is having these cortisol issues. And especially any time that you're working where sirens are involved. And I always tell people, You see a cop flying by, a fire truck flying by. It's an annoyance. You got to pull over and stop. Must be exciting to do that work, but you don't really think too much of it. But then once you are that, because I didn't ever envision myself being a police officer. I just took the PT test. I ended up being a cop, but it was very much, I was the guy in the interview that said, like, why do you want to be a cop? I'm like, I think I would be good at it. And everyone else, 100% of everybody else that ever gets that question always goes, well, I've always dreamed. And I'm like, I said that 0 times. I was honest with you guys from the get-go. I really hope that everybody takes notice of your book and of these things, and that somehow you end up going viral for this, and that this actually takes notice across the nation, because the only person that really talks about this on a regular basis is Joe Rogan, always saying the same things like, what is it we need to do to fix law enforcement? Because neither of them have been cops. Neither of them have put a shield on their chest and gone out and stood in harm's way for people that might not like you, actually people that might hope you get hurt. And the fact that you're talking about now, you're in that role, you have all that weight on your back, and you're thinking, daydreaming of going left of center, right? I've never experienced that. And that's not to say that, I'm stronger than you, because I'm not. I think that we need to come to a place to where we realize the people that are actually best suited for the job are the people that are the ones who actually feel what they're supposed to feel. And the people that shove it down and keep it held down, and as you described, especially law enforcement officers that just keep it shoved down. And then they go home and somebody spills the milk, somebody breaks a bowl, somebody does something, and then you fly off the handle at them. That is the clue that you're the one who's actually not handling it well. And it's the people that are recognizing ahead of time that they need help, that they need to do something for their health. Unfortunately, it's just the departments. I'm going to go ahead and call it out. Like, as a police officer, I can tell you, my department, although I think there's a lot of phenomenal people there, as an organization, their duty is to just keep officers on the road, keep the citizens protected, and they don't really ever take the time to stop and look at what the officer's actions are and then go, what is it we're doing? It's never what we're doing. It's always on that officer. It's always their fault. There are no other factors. It is 100%, not 99. It's 100% on that individual for what he did, that he thought that this was okay to run code to this call and flying around without a seatbelt on. And again, I keep going into these different things I'm going to bring up later, where you're no good to us if you never make it to the call, right? That, again, that's a clue, right? The people that are really feeling it and are stepping back and going, I need help. Those are the people that we should focus on, and those are the officers that are really making a difference and we need to focus on in this nation.
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example of that. When I left full-time law enforcement, it was 2015. We were barely talking about this stuff at that point, I had an incident where I had been working Marine Patrol. It was a holiday weekend, so a 3-day weekend. I would work on the boat 7 a to 2 p, and then get in my car 4 p.m. to midnight. And I did that 3 days in a row. Well, on my 6th shift for the weekend, I, in a parking lot, fell asleep behind the wheel and hit like one of the poles.
Yeah. Bollards or something like that.
Yes. At first was just like, yeah, you screwed up. And then one of my majors, he pulled me in the office and he said, what's going on? Why did this happen? And that was the first time anybody said, instead of, hey, you screwed this up, fix it. That was the first time anybody said, what's going on? And this particular major was not, he was the last person I would have expected to ask a deeper question. And I said, I haven't been sleeping. I've been working all these extra hours. I had just gone through Dunkin' to get my coffee to try to stay awake for the night. When I pulled into the parking lot, I guess I knew I was safe and my body relaxed and I fell asleep. He understood and he accepted that explanation. Instead of providing some kind of support. And I'm not blaming him because he didn't
Right,
know what
right.
he didn't know. His response was to send me to a driving class, which, you know, like I didn't need help driving. I needed support on how to manage my time. I needed somebody to look at my hours and say, you're working a little too much. Maybe we need to pull back on this extra detail. I appreciated the effort on the questioning, but then the disciplinary action, it didn't make sense.
Right.
And it is on the departments to start to notice these breadcrumbs and look at your people. And that is where we need to develop a firm foundation for systems and notice these 6 areas of workplace that need to be in balance so that when you have these systems in place, when moments like that happen, you can address it human to human.
Mm-hmm.
You have the space and the capacity to do that because the disciplinary action is because it is necessary. If you're screwing up, you have, sure.
100%.
And so you have to take responsibility for your actions and all of that. But if you have those systems in place to take care of that, those take care of themselves. And you can show up as a leader, as a human, and then you can take ownership and say, where have I failed you as a leader? How can I better support you? And I'm not saying that people failed me. That has never been my narrative. That's not my position or my perspective. But I'm saying if we're going to prevent this in the future, this is how we do it.
Absolutely. I want to make sure and clarify, you have to take responsibility 100%. And if you are the one who fell asleep and hit the pylon, or in my case, if you were driving while responding on your tough book and texting back and forth with another officer and you hit a vehicle that was parked in the actual roadway, you know, that is 100% on me. If I cut myself and what you do as a reprimand is slapping me on my cut, right? You're not
Yes.
helping me by sending me to a class and wasting both of our time. And what it teaches me is that you are tone deaf. And that's really, that's more harm than good. Even if that was somehow going to help you maybe have a few days to where you had to sleep, you had more opportunity to sleep. And maybe that's what he's saying. But either way, you can't be tone deaf about your response. And that's where law enforcement agencies, anytime you try to mandate, it's just that the departments have to look at doing things preemptively instead of reactionary. And it's departments who are going to make that decision. It's leadership within law enforcement agencies that are going to take the steps, or they're not. So your department can fall apart around you and your officers can keep quitting, can keep getting into car accidents as they're falling asleep at the wheel or choosing to drive into oncoming traffic, and you don't know which is which. And you can blame all that on them and somehow sleep at night. But the other option is you could actually take an opportunity, go in. If you're a police chief, send this to a police chief, send this to somebody, and just go into your department and have all of the information about any incidents that your officers have been in with it coming to do with accidents, with sleep issues, with losing their cool and just going off on somebody, and audit that. Have a professional from the outside, somebody with a skill set more like your own, somebody who can actually go, okay, I can advocate for this because I've actually been in these stressful jobs. Look at each one of these and let's talk to this officer about these things. It doesn't have to be some big long drawn out thing. It could just be a very quick 15-minute, 20-minute conversation. It shouldn't be seen as them being punished. It should be seen as not a tone deaf, we should punish you for you being sleep deprived, right? And that's in my estimation, something that would absolutely make a difference today in every police department if they did that.
Yeah. And I think another great example of that is I mentioned my report writing. I wasn't getting reports turned in a timely manner. They sent me to a report writing class. Now, I'm somebody who had a 4.0 in my master's degree. I'm a published author. I had no problem. I don't have problems with words. I was having literal cognitive issues. And so just to add to that, you know, like if you're noticing a problem with performance, make sure you're actually checking in with that person. Make sure it's not, you know, maybe they're taking care of somebody at home They're being a caretaker for somebody at home. Maybe they have a new baby at home and they're not getting any sleep. Maybe, maybe they've got an alcohol problem. Maybe,
Maybe.
I think, right. But my point being, have a relationship with these people. If you're going to be a leader, don't just be a
And that's what we
boss.
have. We have a lot of bosses and not
Yeah.
leaders.
Yes. Don't just shoot out your emails and shoot out your texts and say, here's what I expect from you this shift and blah, blah, blah. Have a relationship with your people. Because even if you do approach them, if they don't feel any kind of connection with you, if there's no trust there, which is your responsibility to build that, they're not going to confide in you. They're not going to say, yeah, I've been feeling it a lot lately and I don't really know what it is. Or, and then you have a conversation about it. And then maybe you hand them some resources. And I kind of hate that, because when somebody's really struggling, they don't necessarily just want a list of resources. They want somebody that's going to be there to support them in real life. But if there isn't a trust established, then maybe there can be a trust established somewhere else. But I really think so much of it comes down to leadership and leading as humans, because law enforcement is one of those jobs where it demands your humanity while also expecting that you numb it. We have to keep our humanity within the walls of our own departments if we're going to save our own lives.
With the leadership specifically, let me take it back to a marriage, finding a person that it's not just some random little checklist of all these things that people typically are looking for right now, right online, to find the right person to date. And if you meet these, you marry them. What makes the difference in a marriage and a relationship, and I'll connect this in a second, it's the ability to know that person. It's not until something is happening and that person can come to you and pull you to the side away from other people and be like, hey, this isn't normal for you. Fill me in. Like, what is it that's going on? That moment when that person can say that to you and can actually be accurate, because I have family members who are wrong 100% of the time. They're every single time. I know they don't listen to my podcast, so let's not worry here. They say it every time. Well, I really know you. And so I know when you do this, this actually means this. And they're wrong 100% of the time. That is more like law enforcement supervision that I've experienced. And again, I did have some really good leaders, but overall, most people's experiences that I come into contact with, right? What you're getting is so tone deaf, and it cuts you because that person could just spend a few minutes of actually getting to know you and visiting with you. Each shift, you have already set time that you're there when somebody else is on call, somebody else is taking all the calls. And I get it, a day where it's busy and you show up and they're already working a DUI with 3 cars and you need to go out there real quick right now. Cool. But there's always going to be days where you can take time to actually talk with your officers. And I think it wasn't until I left and got into private contracting security work, where the leader there, Andy Wilson, retired Delta Force Sergeant Major, imagine that, is one of the best leaders that I've worked with since leaving special operations, where everybody, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you fill the water containers, but if everybody, secretaries, you're getting called into his office once a year, and he has a block of 30 minutes to an hour in which any single thing that you want to talk about, it's not going to be relayed to your supervisor. Your supervisors and team aren't going to know when you're being called necessarily either. And it's just done so perfectly. And that should be the blueprint for what it looks like. But you can't just demand and be a supervisor, be a boss, because then you set all this up, which is perfect, to bring them in for this moment. And guess what? They're not going to say a single thing to you because you have no rapport. You don't know them at all. And without that actual relationship, they know that they're going to get screwed over if they say anything, and they know that this is going to get back to their bosses. And because you don't even know what to ask, you automatically are going to assume they have a drinking problem because they do. Let's be real. Most law enforcement struggles using alcohol to numb the pain, self-medicate, and to try to fall asleep. I know a lot of guys that they wouldn't take any sleeping pills, but they try to get drunk enough to fall asleep. And it
Oh,
does
yeah.
the opposite to
I
the
have a
body.
soapbox moment for that too. That is it's almost like it becomes standard issue, right? Have a little nightcap, sleep it off, come back the next day. Alcohol does not allow you to get into REM sleep. And REM sleep is where your brain kind of goes through the car wash and gets rid of all the debris from the day and refreshes so that you can actually and it resets your body on a cellular level. When you drink alcohol, it does help you fall asleep because it has sedative effects. However, it spikes your blood sugar. And in the middle of the night, when your blood sugar spikes, you're spiking your cortisol and all kinds of chemical reactions are happening in your body. And when your blood sugar has to come back down, it sets a stress response off in your body. And then you're having an adrenaline dump in your sleep. You don't even know it. And it's not allowing you to get any kind of quality sleep or deep sleep, allow your body to regenerate the way we're designed to do. You have your little nightcap. You think you're going to sleep well. You wake up feeling exhausted and you're not sure why. And then by the end of that night, you're even more exhausted and you just really want a quality night's sleep. And so you think that extra little half glass of whiskey is going to help you. And it's not. It's doing the exact opposite. It's truly like it needs to be under control. Even if it's just one drink a night, it is absolutely preventing you from getting good quality sleep, which is something the ISCP talks about all the time in terms of cognitive performance and mental wellness.
And just basic understanding of REM sleep, which I've always understood REM is where your brain is clearing out its memory and cleaning itself. And then your deep sleep is where your body's physically rehabbing from your workout, rebuilding your muscles and all those things. I didn't understand that until I was in law enforcement for a little while. My bachelor's degree is also criminology, and that was while I was a police officer. I was raised around alcoholics, drug addicts. My grandfather was an alcoholic. And so I already knew my dad had issues with alcohol when he was young, joined the Navy. And of course, they just stay drunk on a ship. Why not? Right? It's not like you can go anywhere. And
medicine.
yeah. So I already knew too, even back then as a kid, I'd already learned that can be passed down and that people can end up having issues with alcohol and becoming addicted to it prior to even you taking your first drink, and then you start drinking and then you can't control it. And I am a person who's always going all gas, no brake. So I never even wanted to put myself in that position. So my whole life, law enforcement, Marine Corps, special ops in the Ranger Regiment, private contractor, oil field, all alcoholic jobs. Everyone's drunk all the time. I've never taken a drink of alcohol in my entire life.
Wow.
Now,
good for you.
right. And it's more impactful for that. And I'm literally unpacking that right now. I've never even stopped and thought about what that really meant. Physiologically, I understand, right? It's obviously I wasn't destroying my sleep. I can't imagine with the little amount of sleep that I was getting, how much worse it would have been had I been drinking alcohol and doing all these other things. In addition to the money that I didn't want to spend on alcohol, because I saw the tabs people were paying. I'm like, you're spending all your money at the bar. I don't know how you people are doing this. But this isn't right. This isn't accolades for me, but it is a lesson that I learned early. And if you learn this early, which again is, my audience, I'm hoping to help a lot of our young men who are going to grow up and be police officers, a lot of our young, girls that are going to grow up and be police officers. What I'm telling you is it's possible. And what I'm also telling you, and you are really sharing the details of, is if there's one thing you could do, in addition to just drinking plenty of water and staying hydrated, that's one of the most important thing right off the bat. But number two is like, everybody's going to drink. Just assume that. But if you could limit that, and if you could really understand that when you are taking this into your body, you are going to destroy your ability to get really good sleep. If you just knew that information and that helped somebody decide to not keep drinking right before bed, to not do the nightcaps thing, that one thing could make a huge difference in their cognitive ability and that road to burnout, to where you're not daydreaming about driving into oncoming traffic, or you're not wearing a seatbelt on purpose while you're running code 2 calls. So it's these small little things that I want to kind of bring to people's, awareness, especially
Yeah.
people that are the future of our departments.
Yeah. And we hear these things ad nauseum, like don't drink, but drink your water. Don't overdo it on the caffeine, and, eat your vegetables, get enough protein, exercise. We hear all these things like all the time. And
Mhm.
people, I think, they tune it out. It becomes
Yep.
undervalued and overlooked because they're like, oh my gosh, I bet you're going to say drink your water. And I'm like, yes, I am, because here's why. And that's something that I have really woven into my trainings. I have a whole section on why you need to be hydrated. It's not just because being dehydrated is bad for you. It's you literally have to flush out the cortisol from your body. If you do not do that, the fascia, the webbing in our body that holds up everything in, it starts to dry up. So think about like shrink wrap. And so it puts basically like shrink wrap on our lymphatic system. Our lymphatic system is responsible for filtering out waste and toxins, right? Okay. When your lymphatic system isn't working, then your endocrine system, which is your hormonal hub, central control for all of your hormones, is not working. And when all those things start to fail, now your liver is impacted, now your kidneys are impacted, and you're in a world of hurt just from being dehydrated. And then, you could get a UTI. UTIs are not just some little infection. They actually impact the connection between a UTI and the cognitive decline that happens during a UTI, the connection with the brain there. Nobody seems to know about what happens with that. It's like dementia, if you will. Like you become really confused. And so it's a whole world of things
It compounds.
just if you're not drinking your water. And I was hospitalized a couple of times as a teen for severe dehydration. And I learned very quickly that, that's very, very important. And coffee doesn't count. So drink your water.
Yeah.
But it is these little foundational things. And something I teach about is if you want to be extraordinary, you have to remember that the foundation for that is the ordinary.
Mhm.
If you're going to go the extra mile, and if you're going to be something and you're going to be an influence in this world, you have to master the ordinary before you can go for the extra. Otherwise, it's all empty and counterfeit.
Absolutely. Urinary tract infection, for those people that aren't very familiar with the UTI.
I don't know why I threw that out there, but
No, you're good. But I have to throw that out there because as a guy, I didn't know what that was for a very long time, and I was embarrassed to ask. But yeah, that's where it complicates so many different things. How your body is able to adapt and just kind of ignore the pain, right? Think of the little signal light on your car, right? The little brake light comes on, the check engine light comes. All these little lights can come on and go back off, and all these things. You don't think a lot about it in your car, but your body is the same way, and it'll throw a light and just shift. It'll shift things over so you can keep going. And then once this is about to break, then it shifts over to something else. And that's how you can end up to where everything feels like, oh no, I literally can't even move. I've got no energy. I'm collapsing here. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong today. You've been on your last leg for the last 2.5 years, and it's finally time to pay the piper, right? You met the bill, and it's time to pay the check. And you don't understand where all this came from. And I know people that went to extremes in law enforcement where they end up having, specifically a guy had multiple kidney stones, and this dude was 23 years old. And I'm talking like he was in so much pain, which for a guy, I guess it's as close as we get to childbirth as passing large kidney stones. And he's doing that at 23, 24 years old. And I'm like, you have to be 21 to even be a police officer. You just started your career. What are you doing? Oh, he's eating like 150 grams of protein at a time. And that's all he's doing is just eating the protein with no water and like barely any water. And you're just like, how did you think that was going to work out for so long? Right. But again, his body just kept going until it was building all this up. And then now it's time to pay the check. And you're not going to like what that day looks like.
Yeah. Well, and a solid reminder too is that when we turn 18 or we turn 21 and we graduate the police academy, whatever that looks like, that's not a blank slate for you.
Right.
You have an entire lifetime of experiences prior to that. So when I was 17, I lost my best friend since we were 4 years old to suicide.
Yeah.
I was 17. I didn't know how to deal with that. Nobody did. And so I just kept going. And 2 years later is when I entered into law enforcement. I had no idea. I thought, wow, that was, 2 years at that time seems like a really long period of time.
Yeah.
And a lot had changed. And I thought, well, that's behind me and I can just move on. And we think that we get this fresh start. And it's like, by the way, you are one human with one body, one brain, one nervous system, and one life. And you carry all those old experiences with you until you decide to take out the trash, until you decide to face those things, work through them, figure out how they affected you, how they're still affecting you in the moment, and then extract the wisdom from it and move forward stronger. It doesn't mean that you can't be affected by those things, but taking a good hard look at what you bring into these careers, because first responder jobs and law enforcement in particular, if you have any kind of insecurity, if you have any kind of, for lack of a better word, trigger, if you have any kind of experience that has impacted you on a very deep level, the job is going to magnify that. And you have to know yourself and understand how these things are impacting you if you're going to be successful in your career and if you're going to, live a life where you don't forget that you're human.
We're doing that it was one job from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. You said at the port, right? You said that was 3 days a week that you were doing that?
It was a special detail that we did. We could sign up and go out anytime,
Mhm.
but on holiday weekends, yeah, I
Okay.
usually tried to pick up as many as I could.
As many of those. I think that's something that needs to be addressed, but I haven't ever heard anybody talk about this. Law enforcement officers, your hands are so full with your job. It's absolutely natural for every police officer to go out and get 2, 3, 4, 5 side jobs on top of that. Now, granted, I understand that most of those jobs are like I did, work at a bank, working at a movie theater, doing extra security. You're just sitting around, right? So you think, well, I'm just sitting around. I'm not doing anything. It's not like I'm chasing anybody or tackling anybody. You're aware and you're hyper vigilant. Well, you are if you're good at your job. So you're at the bank and you're actually paying attention. You should be paying attention all the time. One of mine, which I was extremely lucky to get, was the Customs Border Protection in Oklahoma City came to us, not to Oklahoma City law enforcement. And that was, they told us, was based on our reputation. Moore, Oklahoma, which is where I was a police officer, had a reputation that we didn't take any crap off of people. And we were very, very professional in what we did. And for that reason, they came to us and asked if we would help them train Customs and Border Protection pilots who are federal law enforcement and carry a gun and have credentials, but receive no training after their initial training going through, FLETC. And
Wow.
So they're doing flight stuff because they're pilots, but they're
Mhm.
not actually doing the law enforcement side because the chances are going to be in a law enforcement scenario and have to pull their gun and shoot somebody is very small. However, you're going to 7-Eleven and you're getting gas and you're getting something, and all of a sudden this happens in the parking lot. All of a sudden this happens. Somebody approaches you. You're getting carjacked, whatever it is. And we threw a million scenarios at them. What I loved about that was because we're running simunition rounds, we're making it 100% real because we're really actually just using our actual life experience of what happened to us on a call. And we're just recreating that for them because we already know all sides of what happened that day. And we're going to throw that at them. And maybe you think you're going to run into this and shoot, but you're not. They end up having to actually pause and think. And this is where you see the guys that really should have been getting more training and didn't. My whole point there is just that was exciting. And that's the most fun side job you could possibly have. And I'm getting paid, $35 an hour or whatever. And that was big back then. That was when our money was worth a lot more back then. And I love that job. And I never left that on the table. If that was open, I was going. But now that I look back and I look at the amount of hours that I was working, and I'm still going to MMA training, and I'm still training with legit guys who are in the cage and, are all these undefeated dudes who are cage fighters. And that's who I'm training with. And I have 3 other side jobs. This is something that law enforcement officers individually and potential law enforcement officers need to focus on. You already have the gas pedal held down, and you're continuing to accelerate. Every time you go and add another job on top of that, you're pushing the pedal farther down, and you don't realize it, because in the moment it's fun. And this actually is a stress relief. We would love it for law enforcement departments and chiefs and department heads to actually do this amazing thing where they actually care about all their people, get to know all their people, and they give them hugs every day. That's just it's not reality. That's not happening for most law enforcement officers. So the reality is, it is on you to take care of your mental health. And this is what I love about your TikTok specifically, because it's these bite-sized nuggets of absolute wisdom because you have experience. And that's what I love about your TikToks, is because you're hitting the nail on the head, and you're not doing it once. You're not just making a video with one thing to say. All these people are out there taking on all these jobs, taking on all this stress, and you've been there. You've done that. What would you say to people that are continuing to add jobs and staying completely packed to the gill because they need to make money, right? And that's what they focus on, working nonstop and barely seeing their families.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, let me say thank you. I appreciate your appreciation of the TikToks.
100%.
And I think I would encourage them to look at their life as a whole, look at the totality of the circumstances, if you will, and see if it's working. Is it all working for you? It's great to make money and pay the bills, but are you living beyond your means? And is then that causing you to have to work more overtime to maintain that lifestyle? And it is a wonderful thing to be driven and have ambition and want to be a leader and do better every day. But at what cost? Because at the end of the day, you are human. And the only thing we carry with us when we go is our relationships. We often forget that. We have to make sure that, it's all leveling out, that it all makes sense. If there's something that's falling and is not a priority but needs to be, we need to fix it. We talk about compartmentalizing, and I went through the academy in 2008, and that was the only thing they said to us about any kind of mental wellness or anything, was just compartmentalize, keep work at work and home at home. And I've already said this, you are one human with one body, one life, one brain, one nervous system. To think that you can be 2 separate people, it is a lie. If in one area you're going to dilute yourself, and in the other area you're also going to be diluting yourself. And what you're telling your nervous system is, I'm not my whole self here, and I'm not my whole self here. I have to split myself. So it's a matter of coming back to being a whole human and looking at everything, prioritizing all of the foundational stuff, and look and see if are you prioritizing how you appear to other folks? Are you prioritizing surface level friendships over your family? Are you prioritizing, where is your integrity? And yeah, we don't want to bring work home in a sense of making home a dumping ground, but you don't really have the opportunity at work to navigate tough things, to offload trauma, to decompress the stress. You have to find time to do that at home. And if you're always working, you don't have time to do that. So somewhere you're going to have to be intentional about letting that out. Otherwise, it's going to leak out in ways that you don't want it to.
That reminded me, honestly, of one of your TikToks. Imagine being underwhelmed. Imagine being underwhelmed by sirens and running code, but overwhelmed by silence. There's so much wisdom in that police officers are not going to listen to right now until you get to retirement. But I personally, I have this podcast going, and to my left is a walk-in closet. Very first thing, I was like, okay, I'm going to take over this walk-in closet. This is where I'm doing all my podcasts. I outfitted it completely with all of the soundproofing. That way you can clearly hear me and hear nothing else. And I'll be able to be out of the way of the family, out of the way of everything. Easy peasy. Till I sat down. I sat down in there and I tried to talk, and it is so quiet. I am allergic to even going in there. It is so quiet that I can't at all go in there and record anything. During my time as a police officer, there's no way you could convince me to sit still and be quiet and even think about calls. I think it's important to watch videos and see kids being abused, to see horrible things, car wrecks, right? Police officers being gunned down in the line of duty and not pulling their gun out, just yelling no or stop. It's very, very important because you have to be mentally prepared for what you're about to walk into. That being said, I can still tell you right now what the lady looked like and what clothes she was wearing on the first video of the girl, the woman who was the babysitter that was punching a baby like a newborn. The reality that you are going to see that on a daily basis is not necessarily true, but you are going to see something that's going to hit you in your humanity solar plex, and it's going to take you out. You're going to fall on the ground and you're going to want to cry. So one of those calls for me was right out of the gate. I get a baby not responsive, and we show up, and it's the ghetto. It's the Section 8 housing. The mom was laying on the mattress with a newborn, and the baby fell behind the back and upside down and didn't make it through the night. I wasn't ready for that, right? Mm-hmm. I know, I've seen videos, I've watched it, I heard you tell me that it's going to be rough. But now this is right in front of me, and I'm actually having to go in, and I'm seeing the baby. It doesn't matter if you've been to war. It doesn't matter if you got to see people blown up, burned, decayed, all the things. Doesn't matter. I'm not in a third world country with these other people. I'm here in America, and this is the mother, her child that she should love and claims to love. She didn't do this on purpose, according to her, and we have no reason to believe otherwise. But when I tell you that 30 minutes after being there, she was smoking a cigarette with another lady, and they were joking and laughing together. I became so angry at her. I wanted to go tackle her to the ground and shake her by the neck and go, "Did you not even love your baby? How are you laughing right now?" The human reaction that you're seeing on a daily basis is not normal. And when you are not going to sit and think about that and process that because you don't have time, you got to shove it down, and you're a rookie. What are you going to do? You just went through the academy. You're going to quit now? No, you got to gut it through. This is day one stuff, rookie. What are you talking about? And everybody else around looks like they're okay. Everybody else can't wait to get to work. Everybody else's uniform looks nice. Everybody else looks like this is normal. So it's normal. So let's do this. I've got to be normal. So I just shove it down and shove it down and shove it down. And you do the next one and you do the next one. When I knew that I wasn't making a difference, for sure, was when I have to take the handcuffs off a guy who had just exposed himself to an 8 and a 9-year-old girl. They were walking down the street and he drives up and exposes himself. I catch him. Shouldn't have happened. No way. I just happened to be driving by. He just happened to have done it right there. Just happened to. There's like 5 just happened to's in the story, and I catch him. Dead to rights. It's him. The girls can identify who it was. Easy. This guy's going down. 4 hours or so later, I'm taking the handcuffs off of him as he laughs at us and walks out. The girls had to identify his genitalia in order for that to be proven and for it to meet the criteria of the law. You got an 8 and a 9-year-old. Their parents are present, and now they have to tell their parents they know exactly what it looked like. And they're going to have to testify to this court. They're going to have to continue to identify. Obviously, that didn't happen. So a small amount of time later, I'm on a date night with my wife. And guess who's there on a date with some other girl, some other lady? And guess what I cannot do without getting fired? Say anything to her. Guess what I can't do without getting fired? just walk up and punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so I'm literally doing nothing. I'm literally a secretary who's just noting crime. We're not stopping anything. We're not teaching anybody lessons. He now knows that he can do this and get away with it all the time. Guess what was already happening and continued to happen? Somebody kept driving up to the high school and exposing themselves to high school girls, specifically in cheerleader outfits, and then driving off. Never can catch him because there's 50 ways to get out of the high school parking lot. And by the time the girl actually calls it in, he's already miles away. Who do you think's doing that?
Yeah.
Probably somebody, if it's not him, it's somebody similar who's gotten away with it. And so it was that. It's every time that I have to take the handcuffs off. It's every time that I go in to traffic court and they throw out something off of a technicality, because technically his truck had a sticker that meant that it could be a farm truck and blah, blah, blah. So he didn't have to wear a seatbelt. And so when you pulled him over and you caught him with this or with that, all that's thrown out because of the very first step. And it's like, so this whole system is set up for failure, and we're all just pretending that we're making a difference here. And the gut punch it's not from the outside. It's not even your department. It's not like anybody there is doing it to you that you could be angry at that person. It's the whole system. And so I think it's those times when more officers than would actually admit it to themselves think of quitting. They can't. It's that same sense of duty. It's everybody else is going to have to take up your slack, and all of them are going to be what? Sad when you've taken your own life? No, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to know you were weak. In your mind, that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Obviously that's not true, but that's what's rolling around in your head the whole time you're wearing that shield.
Yeah. But the culture, often the masks that we're all collectively wearing, tells us that that's true. I sat in a squad room one night after shift and somebody said, "Hey, what are you doing later?" And we got off at midnight, but there was a group of us that would still hit the bars and close them down sometimes. And I made a joke and I said, "I think I'm going to go home and eat my gun." And they all laughed. And I don't blame them. I posed it as a joke, but that's what we do, that dark humor. And so, the culture kind of creates this and we normalize it, and we're all, if none of us are willing to speak up and be honest about our true thoughts internally, then everybody looks around and thinks they're the only one. And that's a dangerous place to be. And I think that's why I talk about burnout so much, is because we've completely normalized burnout. Like, well, isn't everybody burned out? Yeah, that's not normal. And when you look at, and again, because I'm a big nerd, you look at the 12 stages of burnout, the final stage is not wanting to be in your own life anymore. So at what point are we normalizing going downstream, going over the rapids? At what point are we stopping these guys and saying, why are you even falling in the stream to begin with? Instead, we just go, oh, it's normal. And then they go over the waterfall, never to be seen again. And we don't even, we wonder what happened. I'm so confused. He seemed fine. He was one of the best. Yeah, well, because we collectively have normalized it and he thought he was alone. Meanwhile, we're all floating downstream, trying to figure out how we even fell in. And some people are like, who cares about burnout? And I'm like, well, let's catch these guys long before we ever get to the point where they're in trouble. That's why we need to care about burnout.
And I think one of the signs that you are heading toward disaster that most people have normalized, especially in law enforcement, is when a police officer, he first starts his career and him and his wife are doing great. Now, all of a sudden, things are not going so well at home. That person that you married, unless it was completely a sham to begin with, which we're going to go ahead and assume it wasn't.
It happens.
Very few times. It does happen, but those are obvious, right? If that's the case and she only married you for the money, the number of people who dismiss the person, the husband or the wife that is wanting a divorce from you, and you are looking at them like they're the ones who are insane. Here's the clue. If they keep telling you you've changed, if they keep telling you that you're an a-hole, they keep telling you that you've turned into a jerk, that you're always right, I'm just going to go ahead and let you know now. That is a sign from God letting you know that you have one person in your life that's willing to tell you the hard truth. And you are not going to see it. When I was a police officer, I was nicknamed Officer Happy Smile Wave because our department had a rule. You do not wave at people. You don't smile at people. You don't even roll your windows down. You wear sunglasses. Your windows are tinted for a reason. You keep them up. You just drive. And again,
Wow.
that works really well against criminals because you are mysterious. You are always business. And the other rules were if you cry, you get a ticket.
Yes.
Especially women will cry. You
Oh, yeah.
definitely get a ticket. You don't get warnings if you're crying. That's not how
Yeah.
it works. So, but that was a sense of pride that our department had. Now, I was applying to the department and I'm going through the hiring process, and my now wife gets pulled over. He gets a ticket because she was crying. Years later, I find out who that was. It was one of my buddies on the department. And he's like, yeah, man, that's obviously, you know, the rule.
You can't read the label from inside the bottle. And when I was in like deep into my burnout, it wasn't until my new boyfriend at the time, now husband, said to me, you know, you don't have to live like this. That was the first time I ever considered maybe don't do law enforcement. Like, because when you get in it, the blinders are on. You are committed. You are dedicated. This is my job. And if you don't know who you are outside of the job, it also becomes your identity. It becomes who you are at the core of your humanness. And that's a dangerous place to be because it pigeonholes you in. It doesn't allow you to see the opportunity for any other possibilities. And so you just feel locked in. And it's a good thing to be locked in tactically, strategically. But when you feel locked in as in trapped, like you're in your own kind of prison, that's not healthy. And so it wasn't until somebody else said, hey, you don't have to do this forever, that I actually considered like, whoa, for real? Like I just never even considered it, did not even cross my mind. And I think that is the case for so many.
And what's funny is that language right there is the same language you're using when you're talking to a crackhead in the ghetto, right? But
yeah.
So it hits you so hard because you know that you say that to people all day, every day, and they're too dumb to change. They're too dumb.
They
They're
can't read the
idiots.
label from inside their bottle.
Yes.
They're
But that's right. That's
shake and
our,
bake meth bottle.
I'm not saying they really are idiots and dumb, but as a police officer, that's all. You shake your head and you go, how is somebody living like this? They are going from, you know, they're stealing stuff to buy pills and they're doing all these things. And then if you took their life side by side with yours and you look at how much compensating that you're doing and how many things that you're trying to pretend that aren't a problem, you have more problems than this person does. They have one issue. They have a drug and that's it. And they're just trying to get to that drug. And that's all they're focused on. And that's all they're not trying to hurt anybody, but they're just trying to get this drug so they can feel good. And then meanwhile, you know, you have so many things that you're dealing with. Your body's falling apart. You can't sleep. You're becoming alcohol dependent. Your wife is now, you know, so distant and has told you this for years. And now she's actually trying to get the paperwork to leave you. There's so many warning signs that are going off, I think, in most police cars that they can't see. That
Their ego won't let them see it.
Their ego won't let them see it, and their duty won't let them quit. They won't let them believe that there is another way to live. I had the blessing of already going into this as I didn't grow up to be a police officer. I didn't have that as a dream. But I was all in. When I was there, I was 100% a police officer. And I knew that eventually I was going to leave and I was working on my degree. Oh, by the way, I was going to school full time, driving to college every single day, multiple times, multiple classes a day, every day, in addition to my 3-4 jobs and working full time and doing traffic grants and working out twice a day, including MMA with professional fighters. So when you say burnout, that's what I immediately think of. And I go, I have no idea how my body held up. I'm going to go with no alcohol, a ton of water, and I'm working out constantly is the only way mentally that I made it through all that. And my wife gets a very, very large set of wings when she gets to heaven for surviving with me because we got married while I was a police officer.
Wow.
And then she deployed to combat as a Marine, diesel mechanic.
Wow.
I'm going to segue this into having somebody that you love and that loves you, and you know 100% they love you. And then they are so miserable 9 months into your marriage, 9 months into being married to you, that they then volunteer to go to Iraq. This is when I say warning signs in your car, I'm telling you, the strobe bar fell into my lap and was going off in my face and I didn't see it. Right. And now it's pity me. Now I feel bad for me. And we're supposed to be in the honeymoon phase. And, she just ditched me and I couldn't look in the mirror and see why it was that she was so miserable already being 9 months into being married to me. And when you made a TikTok where you put the report writing when the department hugger offers you a hug and you're like, nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. But I remember this distinctly. All my buddies are getting together and of course they're all drinking and watching a sports game. And one of my buddies' wives was there and she knew that my wife had been gone, I think at that point for like 5-6 months. And she was like, can I give you a hug? And I was just like, I didn't think anything of it. And it wasn't weird, but she hugged me. And when I tell you that there are a few times that I can remember physical touch, feeling strange, that was one of them. And I can still remember right now, like it was so foreign to me. It was like I hadn't physically touched other skin except for applying handcuffs in so long that it really creeped me out and it messed with my head as I went home. And I'm just like, I am going through like withdrawal of not having human contact. And I almost wanted to tell her, right? Because I don't want to freak her out. I want to make it weird for her husband or for her. But I was just like I needed that hug so much more than I realized. And there's so many police officers, and I'm sharing all of these things because there's officers that have gone through this, that have had a hug, and that felt creepy. That did not feel right. That's weird. I feel like I need that way more, but I'm not about to say that to anybody. When your spouse doesn't have the opportunity to volunteer to go to Iraq to get away from you, but they want to stay gone, they're constantly wanting to go on trips with their friends. Maybe you married a gold digger who actually doesn't even like you at all and just wants money. But if you're not independently wealthy, that's not the case, my guy. It's actually because you're a jerk and she has to get away from you for her mental health.
Well, and then flip that around. When you have a spouse that feels more at home while at work because there's structure there and they get validation there and things make sense there and they're primed and conditioned to be there. They're trained to be there. They get feedback on their performance that's, constructive or praise, go to work more, they pick up more overtime because things make sense there, they feel good there, and they are not home very much because they're not trained on how to be a husband or a dad because there's no standardized training for that.
Yeah.
And there's the feedback they get is you forgot to take the trash out again, or the grass is really getting high out there. When you have that situation too, you got to think about the spouse on the other side of that of, wow, he doesn't even want to be here. He's never home. But there's a stigma on police wives, that they're needy and they're victim-y. And it's like, well, when you stop to think about the environment that creates that, it's a cringy moment. You got to face the reality here. And I think that prioritizing those relationships needs to be paramount. There's a lot of information out there right now that is talking about how the number one indicator of how well you bounce back from a critical incident is the support system that you have before that incident even happens. Mm-hmm. So making sure you build those support systems and have those solid relationships is huge. It's not, I'll reach out when I need somebody. It's build the foundation now. Build the safety net before you need it.
Absolutely. No is a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm.
That is an amazing soundbite, but let's continue.
I did not
No,
come up with that, just for clarification's sake. I
that's
have no
fine.
ownership over that.
That's fine. No is a complete sentence. You're not a 24/7 emotional tow truck.
I did come up with that one.
If you don't draw a line, you will drown in others' dysfunction. Now, that is a liver shot if there ever was one. If you ever seen somebody get punched straight in the liver and see what that looks like, the strongest person crumples. Doesn't matter. Reality for law enforcement is you are already spread way too thin. And now the joy of your wife is dragging you to this get together. You are now being voluntold that you're going to go to this thing. And now all these people around you are going to ask you all the questions they've ever wanted to ask a police officer. And by the way, they're going to ask you about, the most random off the wall things, or they're going to tell you about the most horrific video they just saw. And tell me about the worst crime you've ever seen. What's the most disgusting crime scene you've ever seen? Have you ever dealt with an actual murder? What's that really like for you as a police officer? And you go,
Play the music.
I don't want to be here. I don't ever want to be here. I don't ever want to be in a place where other people are, unless they're police officers who know how to keep their mouths shut and just enjoy not silence, but the sports game. Just enjoy telling jokes and sharing stories of some crazy thing. Also going back to your dark humor, right? That's what you get ingrained in. You want to stay in a place that's comfortable for you. And the reality is that's not, it may be comfortable. A lot of things are that are not healthy. A lot of people that are on drugs are comfortable when they're on drugs, but it's not healthy. And it's not until you realize that as a police officer that you can do something about it. Because if you think your level of comfort is a definitive sign that you are in the right place around the right people doing the right thing, you are going to be wrong so many times, but you're never going to see it. And that's the true tragedy of it. You can't be here for everybody and just be answering questions nonstop about the law, about all those things. You're still going to do it. The whole thing is, like you say, like, you're going to do it, but limit that. And that's the key. The key is to draw a line and to be able to just tell people, no, I really can't. I had a problem with that, as I'm sure you did, and every police officer, finding that line where I'm literally working a domestic for friends from church, their daughter's boyfriend, who's been physically assaulted by his own father. So I get it, why I need to be there. And who else is going to show up? I'm going to show up and make sure he doesn't get punched by his dad. But I just found myself in this position. And this was the one time where I was like, yeah, this is my day off. And I really shouldn't be doing this right now. This is really dumb. And then afterwards, that kind of set into motion me thinking a little bit more about volunteering to help people. But you just have to draw a line and you have to tell people no.
Yeah. And I think that feeds into the cynicism, one of the other pillars of burnout. And we have this thing where we become chronically unimpressed because we've lived in the extremes and everybody else is just so impressed by all of the things that you do. You're so extraordinary and all this. And you're just like, go away. Like, your stories and your problems, I just don't have the space and the bandwidth and the capacity for. And I get that. But there's also something to be said for allowing those situations to stretch you and challenge you in a way that creates growth, not just driving further cynicism.
Amen. And being chronically unimpressed, I want to sit on that for a second. I think that's something that those words are really powerful. I think as a police officer, that would have done me a lot of good to hear that phrase because I felt it, but I didn't know that it was a thing. And by me not having the ability to mirror or show emotion, you're not doing anything overtly, you're just not reacting the way a normal person should. That in and of itself not only steals your joy in that moment and your loved one when they do something amazing for you, but it also makes them feel small. And it can make that person who's dealing with something really hard, had I told somebody about this baby dying and that really hurt. That hurt
Mhm.
me
Yeah.
for this baby. I know that I didn't do it because I would feel like a weakling and all these other things, but that person not showing emotion, which is exactly what would happen, or, just kind of snickering and making a dark joke about it. No, well, at least it wasn't two. I mean, it's like you'd say things that would make anybody else go, you need
Sorry.
help, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, everybody else is like, they're adding to it, or they're making it ridiculous and over the top. And you talking
Mhm.
about eating your gun. Like, I think this goes into that, where nobody reacted in a normal way when you say, yeah, I think I'm gonna eat my gun. It is funny. Here's the problem. It's funny. It is funny because it's
And
unexpected by definition.
I meant it to be, right? Like,
Right.
I wasn't going to sit in a squad room full of my all male peers who were
Right.
all older than me, by the way, and cry and say, I really want to go home and eat my gun, right? It was screaming for help,
Mhm.
and it
On
had
the
to come
inside.
out as a funny whisper because I didn't know how else to express it, right? And of course I meant it for shock value, right? Like, because
Right.
that's what we do. I'm pretty sure I probably laughed along with them
Oh, yeah.
because I had to deflect,
Right.
right? So, in I think and actually in my second book, there's the last section of it is partner tactics, things you can do to kind of debrief with one another, and one of those things is how to handle it when the dark humor goes a little too dark. And we really need to kind of acknowledge when that happens, because at that point, we're humanness. I keep using that word, but
Mhm.
it's slipping at that point. Like, at what point are we getting too cold?
But and I can see the other side of the coin, right? We don't want to start policing police words and
No.
not allowing them to have dark humor. If you made a policy that you can make dark jokes or dark humor, and you can make, jokes that aren't funny to normal people, but you can't reference suicide specifically geared toward yourself. If you made that rule, it's not going to fix anything. Just
Uh-uh.
again,
I think it's
anytime you try to restrict by a rule, by definition, all that does is make it worse
Mhm.
100% of the time, because all that does is cause them to suppress it. And
Yep.
you actually had a cry for help that, if somebody in that room had known you a little bit better, might
Mhm.
have then paused and been like, after this, hey, just real quick, I know you're joking, but listen, I've had some pretty dark thoughts in my time. If that ever happens to you, just know you can shoot me a text
Yeah.
anytime. That right there is the difference between somebody making a difference and somebody contemplating something bad. You have to be on the peer level or above. You can't just be some civilian saying that, because again, that will automatically be written off. That's where I think you and God putting you on this path. And again, you and I both know, like, we're believers. When I left law enforcement, it felt like, for me, I will say, like I was leaving everyone else behind. And I
Yeah.
knew that everyone else was going to automatically assume that I'm selfish, I couldn't hack it. And actually, especially because I left that for a prison. Who wants to go work in a federal prison after being a police officer? No one. I was the only one there that had ever been law enforcement prior, right? Those two do not mix. That's oil and water. Nobody from the street wants to be disarmed and inside where they have all the weapons. But I did it anyways. And I did it because I wanted to stay married. I wanted to keep my soul. I want to keep my sanity. It still felt like I had control, but all the other indicators, from my wife to my family to, just sitting there in the pew at church completely checked out and thinking of dark humor jokes whenever the preacher misspeaks a word. I'm thinking of some horrific joke about some terrible thing that they're describing, and I can't tell anybody, and I can't wait to go back to work so I can tell one of the other guys. It's those moments where you have to, as a police officer, stop, look yourself in the mirror and go, okay, am I actually as a human, am I actually going to get to where I want to be by continuing what I'm doing? Is this path continuing in law enforcement seems like you're doing the hardest path. It seems like you're doing the hard, right thing that nobody else has the guts to do. And that's what
Yeah.
you tell yourself, and that's what everybody else tells you. But the reality is there's a whole lot of law enforcement officers in this nation, and there's a whole lot of them that are going to continue to go to work while they destroy their lives. And because of going to work, it's the job by definition is going to destroy their life, because they're just not going to quit all their side jobs and get into yoga, into meditation, and really focus on their spiritual walk. Let's just be real. It's not going to happen. So sometimes the only option is to get out. And unfortunately, far too many law enforcement officers choose suicide as a way to get out of all this pressure, all this pain, all these things, as opposed to leaving the department, leaving that life behind. Now, I can tell you from experience now, many, many years removed, I left the department in June of 2010. And then I went inside a federal prison. I lived on oil rigs where more people died. And then overseas contractor in Baghdad, insane. There's no way you're going to tell me you left law enforcement where it was this bad on you, but you went to these other places and those were step ups or those were improvements. And I'm telling you 100% they were. But there was a part of me that still felt, and it still does today when I look at my badge, when I look at my pictures, which I don't have a lot of. That was another thing. I almost have no pictures as a police officer, almost none.
Yeah.
And
I have
it's
a
like getting
handful that I
muscle
have to draw from. Yeah.
What is your experience when it comes to that now, you looking back at leaving law enforcement, and what you would say to both to police officers who are there, who feel like they're finally waking up, that they're maybe burning out and they might need to leave law enforcement, or the suicidal ones who are unfortunately thinking that that way out is the better option?
I think my experience in leaving was very similar. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt a lot of shame. I created a lot of stories in my own head about what other people were thinking. And luckily, I had some conversations with some people that I worked pretty closely with, and I picked up this victim advocacy position. And so I was still seeing these guys. It was good. It was very cathartic for me to like have these conversations. And some of them, I felt a little bit embarrassed. And some of them were like, do you know how many of us wish we could get out? And I'm like, you make it sound like you're in the mafia. And they're like, well, we kind of feel that way, right? And they're like, and so some of them were like, you did the brave thing. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? Because we've been kind of conditioned to think this other way. And I can say it was not easy for me. As you said, God put me on this path. I know hands down, if there was any way to prove it, I would bet my entire life savings that God pulled me from that path and said, I needed you to have this experience. I needed you to go through these things and to be challenged in these ways so that you could grow in this space and then collect this wisdom and then take it back and spread my light everywhere. That's what I know to be true. And, if there are people who are right now struggling with burnout or even further than burnout and, suicidal ideation, I believe that you can prevent it. I believe that you can recover from it and still live well and serve strong. It's going to take work. It's going to take grit. You're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. You might have to create a whole nother circle of people and get away from the people who are not good influences and get into good, solid groups that are lifting you up and supporting you and guiding you. You might need to, I'm a big fan of therapy. Go give that someplace else to live. Get it out. Go to somebody who's culturally competent and is trained in trauma. And as a bonus, maybe they're trained in EMDR. Find what works for you, but make it a priority. Don't let yourself just be on autopilot and go downstream. You're going to have to lock in. You're going to have to get serious about it. And it's not going to be easy and it's going to take time. People contact me and they're like, man, I've been doing this wellness thing for like a year now. And nothing's really changing. And I'm like, how are you doing so good? And I'm like, because it's been 10 years. Because it took a minute, right? Like, I didn't automatically just like drop into who I am now. When I left, I was doing the victim advocacy thing, getting my master's degree, doing yoga teacher training, teaching yoga twice a week, planning a wedding, still doing like working out, doing all these things. Like, I was still in overdrive. And that's when I had to look myself in the mirror and say, you're doing it again. Your nervous system is still spinning out. If we think that it's an inherent flaw within us and that our baseline is here and that we're below the baseline, and that every time we do something to level up, we're only getting to baseline and we're only just filling the potholes, then we never build our on-ramp. But if we look at it from here's where I am right now, and every step I take is a progress and an evolution and a growth, then we start building on top of that foundation and going vertical instead of just constantly trying to play whack-a-mole with our life. And I think that was one of the biggest changes for me, was just that tiny little mindset tweak of, everything builds on top of each other. It's not just let me crawl out of this hole.
Everybody's going through a different thing, but I think what you said was very powerful. Instead of just constantly filling potholes, you need to be going vertical and building that off ramp. We're so busy with the potholes. It feels like it'll never end. So you don't ever feel like that's even a thing. That's not real. That doesn't exist. Everybody always is filling potholes. It's what we do here. I just keep falling into a hole face first, and then I get up, I finally climb out of it, and then I fall right into another one. And you feel like it's hopeless. And again, that's where I think it's once you go into despair. It's once you get to a point to where you think tomorrow can never get better than it is today. And today is so miserable that I don't want to be here. And that's where all of our school shooters come from. That's where all of all of the people that are out there committing horrific crimes. The kid who assassinates Charlie Kirk, take a father away from his two babies and a wife, and all of the impact that he has made of literally just telling people common sense things and sharing the gospel. He's literally telling people, just be a good person. Those clips have been going around a lot where he's like, what do I want to be remembered for? The little girl who asks, what should I do now to prepare myself for the best life I can have? And he's just like, it's very simple. Love one person, really give yourself to your marriage, to being a good person, to making everybody around you feel loved, and try to spread the gospel and trying to help other people live up to their, best life. And when something like that happens, you're trying to figure out how somebody so young could make such stupid decisions. And then, like in the context of this conversation, we're driving in a car that has 3 mirrors, and yet we can't even see the red lights flashing in our own faces all this time. And we just all as humans have to recognize that start going down a road, it can lead you so far in the wrong direction. And we see these kids that are getting indoctrinated, and his father, the one who's been identified as the shooter's father, was a law enforcement officer. And immediately when I heard that, I think of that dad, and I'm like, I have a young son, and if my son grew up to be an assassin and murder an innocent person for no reason other than he said words that were true that I didn't like.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that father's going through. And I know that's something that is automatically, nobody's even talking about or necessarily cares, right? It's his fault. Just like all the other school shooters, it's their parents' fault because they raised them wrong. And the more I got into the school shooters and reading books and learning about them, the more of those kids came from good homes, and they were, just a kid who came out and was angry. And most of them are actually bullies, not bullied. Everybody gets bullied, but most of the time they were actually the bullies. And you're just like, these parents and these people are going through this stuff, and you never think it's going to be you. But some law enforcement officer out there, his son is the one, as far as what we're being told in the media, which I don't trust a lot of.
Yeah. It's something that's so hard to wrap your head around. And what I see there is a lack of self-control, which seems obvious, but what it really is I see everything through the lens of burnout. And it ties back to cynicism, because what that is really a psychological distancing of things that maybe we don't understand.
Mm.
We don't take the time to understand. We don't like these things, or we see something that we want, but we don't believe that we have the ability to attain that. And so we become very cynical about that thing. And then we try to control the narrative on that thing. It's a lack of self-control, and we try to control externally because we don't have the discipline or the responsibility or the self-worth to say, I am in control of my life. I'm in control of my emotions. I'm in control of my thoughts and my decisions. And if I don't like something or I don't understand it, I can just move on. But instead, you're being so internally affected by something that's external from you that you feel the need to literally attack it. It's a lack of that self-control, but on a much, much deeper level. I mean, it sounds obvious. Of course, there's no self-control. Who would do that if you had the self-control? But it's a disconnection from humanity, but there's a lack of purpose and a lack of guidance, I feel. And sometimes I think it's just as simple as being underdeveloped and never having been challenged, being so convicted in the way you believe because you've never given yourself an opportunity to consider an alternative way of thinking.
I know we've already been on for 2 hours. I don't even have your book to go over all the things. I'm just going off your TikToks. I look forward to reading your book. Obviously, you're definitely re-invited back on, and I would love to continue I will continue to support, all of the things that you're doing. I think it's beautiful just as a human to see another human who is so effortlessly, and that doesn't mean that you're not putting in hard work. It comes across so effortlessly that you are able to articulate these little sayings. And again, the 24/7 emotional tow truck that needs to be on a t-shirt for sure. And I need a couple of those.
I'm on it.
So you have to have those. But it's these things that you can come up with a small phrase like that just sounds like a spur of the moment and it came out. But for somebody in law enforcement who's been doing this and they recognize that, they want that shirt and they want somebody to ask them and them to just go, not today, Satan.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's what I think is the beauty of somebody who has found their calling. And listen, a lot of people may not think that this is me finding my calling, but I love this so much, just having conversations with people who are making differences. And if nothing else, right, that comes from this is, like I said to you before we got on this podcast, if I make the difference in a handful of people's lives, that's all I'm going for. And I know regardless, it's fixing mine. This is my therapy. I've never been to a therapist. This is my therapy because I'm learning from this podcast some things that I'm going to have to go back, not in quiet, but in the gym where I do all my thinking and think over these things that I've learned from you and re-listen to this podcast. Anything that we can do to help law enforcement officers to not feel isolated, to give them hope that they don't have to stay in law enforcement if it's going to destroy their life.
Yeah.
And that both of us have had the courage to leave a place that, and again, this isn't me throwing shade at my police department. Any police department that I was at where I'm having to do what I'm doing, and I took on way more work than I needed to do, everybody else is experiencing the same thing. So let's normalize this, make sure everybody understands. It just comes with the job, but you are setting yourself up for failure if you drinking nightcaps, not drinking enough water, not exercising enough, because you're not going to have energy because you're already exhausted from not sleeping. And that's just a repetitive cycle that goes endlessly. And now you're adding on to it these different jobs. And, oh, by the way, you're trying to keep a marriage together and be there for your kids if you have children. It's a wonder that so many people live long enough to retire. And the 5-year retirement, right after 5 years, is the average lifespan of a law enforcement officer in this nation. And that stat was brought up to us in the police department, and we all think, I'm the exception, bro. I'm the exception. And then you see these officers that are 350, 400 pounds. I've worked with guys who were very overweight, and there's various reasons for that. Some people got shot and I didn't even know it. And before we had this podcast, you mentioned was the book,
The Body Keeps the Score.
Body Keeps the Score. That's also on my list of books to buy and to go. There you go.
Mine is very well marked up.
Give us what you learned from your perspective from that book.
I tried to read it years ago because it was recommended to me. And in the time period that I was in, I did not have the capacity and the bandwidth for it. It was not, and many people frame it kind of as a self-help book. It's much more dense than that. It reads more like, in my opinion, it reads more like a textbook. At the time, it was over my head because I didn't have, as Doug White would say, brain not work so good. Years later, after I started doing this work, I reread it and I listened to it on Audible, and I've gained a lot of perspective about what trauma does to the brain, how it gets stored in the body, and how we tend to ignore it, and we contribute our body breaking down to non-related things like, well, that was an old injury, or the kidney stones. That doesn't have anything to do with my trauma, or, what. Okay. It's all tied together, right? And so I think it's a very, very helpful book and a very helpful tool to understand on a deeper level what is happening within us and how it affects us even years later, even if we've buried it for a really long time. I do not recommend it as a step one, which is a lot of the reason why I wrote my book. I could not absorb any of it when I read it previously. So if you're in the thick of it, it might not be the first book to read. Definitely put it on your list. And as you grow and as you evolve and you create more capacity, 1000%. But that's just my opinion on it.
Gotcha. Well, that's what I'm looking for. That's what the average person is going to see and go, okay. So I, it's going to take me a minute before I would get through something like that. And that is the problem though, too. Police officers not actually choosing to do the work, the hard work of finding where these check engine lights going off, that they're having issues, that it's coming apart. They're not dealing as well as they thought or they expect they should. And now it's starting to affect you. And when that's happening, that's the time to not go grab one book that seems over your head and then to give up. And that is what I could see happening. And so that's why I'm very careful when I'm recommending books and those things. I know Doug already went all through your book, and I've talked to Doug extensively about this podcast. I'm super impressed with you guys' podcast, and it wasn't long enough. So maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes will be a podcast to get it through. I haven't even covered all the notes that I have written down in front of me, but everything that you shared here is actual useful information for somebody who is in the law enforcement, who somebody's family is law enforcement. If you're the spouse, kids of a law enforcement officer, more children need to be exposed to what it is that their parent is dealing with, or parents, because it's often two parents. Police officers marry each other. So that's quite common. If kids were aware of what their parents are dealing with and that they're not saying anything and they feel like they live in a ghost house because nobody talks when they're there, you got to understand, like, your parents are digging more holes and burying more things than any gravedigger ever has. Like, you're having to just to put on a smile. And even though they're chronically unimpressed, they're trying to put a smile on their face when something comes across. And it's, like you're trying to pretend to be human when you're a lizard and you're just like, oh, we're smiling. Yeah, we smile at this one. Okay. Yay, we're having a baby. But that's reality. And when you feel that, and that's what I want to leave this off with, if you feel like you're not making a difference, if you feel like you're chronically unimpressed, if you are everybody else's around you 24/7 emotional tow truck, if the idea of you holding down the brakes in your car and continuing to push the gas pedal with every new job you take on and responsibility, if that sounds like something you've dealt with, that's burnout. You're going through it. You're not alone. It's the common. It's what everybody is facing at some point. And it's very common that can happen to you very early in age and in your career. You were talking about already working at 19 years old, and that would spawn the next hour of a podcast. But just the idea of 19 years old, keeping in mind that I joined the Marines at 19. So I get it. Like, you can handle quite a bit at 19, but what you were dealing with specifically with sex crimes and, posing as a child online, and it was your photos that were being used. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, my cheerleading photos.
So again, that's another level that
Yeah.
you have had to deal with at that age. And so much has finally been come to light, all the knowledge that we now have of how long it takes for the brain to fully develop. People aren't really who they are until they're 24, 25 years old. And I remember when my mom told me, listen, you're going to get married. If you get married young, your wife isn't going to be really developed until about 24, 25. And my wife is several years younger than me, 7 years, almost 8. And that we had to go through that. And then it was like 24, 25, that time came. And then all of a sudden we stopped having so many fights, and there was just this click. It was just like all of a sudden. But that's the reality, is we are putting ourselves into a position for burnout way too early. And that happens very often. If you're dealing with any of these things, if you're having suicidal thoughts, if you're making dark humor jokes that are not jokes, reach out. Obviously, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to AK. Just because her name is scary, you can reach out to her, AK. But for real, like, that's why we're here. We're putting this all together. We're spending our time away from our families, away from law enforcement jobs, to do this work, because we need you to know that you are worth us leaving law enforcement to be the voice that you hear simply saying, you can get help. We are here, that we can connect you with that help. And I think with the job of being a police officer comes the ability to rationally talk people through very bad situations. And I'm there with people who are suicidal. I was a critical incident trained officer. So when you're suicidal, off your medication, and schizophrenic, that's when they called me to the scene. I was volunteered to go through that training, but it was amazing because, again, you get to be there to help one person keep their life when they might not have chose to do that with somebody else. And that's what we're trying to continue to do today with both of our works. Again, I'm just the echoer here, but I love all the things that you're putting out in your book, and I can't wait to have you on again later, and we'll go over more of your book. Again, everybody follow her on TikTok, because those things are fire, and continue to follow her on LinkedIn, and I will have all that in the description.
Thank you very much for having me and giving me, yet another opportunity to maybe be the light for somebody. And I appreciate what you're doing, holding that torch as well. And I think there can't be enough of us out there doing this and talking about it and bringing it into the light, because the more we suppress it, the more it just grows and it becomes a bigger threat. And so exposing it and not just giving people hope, but helping them armor up and equip themselves in every way possible to come out successful on the other side, and not only just survive, but make their life something meaningful and something that they can be proud of and aligned with their values and their own integrity, and be bold and courageous in that. That is my hope for anybody that's, well, for anybody really, but especially for anybody that's struggling and they just feel like they just can't get out of the hole. You can. And I want my life to be a testament to that. And I will say that everything I've done, every ounce of every result that I've ever gotten, all the glory for that belongs to God.
Thank you for listening. If you want to reach out to Amanda, hire her for your department, to purchase one of her books. All of that is in the links. The only thing that I am asking Santa for this year are reviews. If you like my podcast, you want to hear more podcasts like this, have Amanda back on, please let me know, both in comments, subscribe, and the reviews. Reviews on Apple, Spotify. Those things mean the world to me, especially as a new content creator.